Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the CX Goalkeeper podcast. Your host, Gregorio Leoni, will have smart discussion with expert, thought leader, and friends on customer experience, transformation, innovation, and leadership. I hope you will enjoy the next episode.
Ladies and gentlemen, today it's really a big pleasure. I am thrilled to have Clare Muscutt with me. She did a great job in the last few months, few years with women in CX, and now she's here on the CX Goalkeeper podcast. Thank you very much, Clare, for finding time to have a chat with me.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me, Greg. It's great to be here.
Thank you very much. How are you? Everything fine on your side?
Yeah, pretty tired actually. Running a startup is exhausting, as I've discovered, but but very happy nonetheless.
Thank you very much. And as usual, I start my podcast asking my guests to introduce themselves, because then it's easier and you can really explain what you like and not me reading through all your curriculum vitae. Clare, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm presently the founder and CEO of the world's first online membership community for women in customer experience called Women in CX. But my career very much started at grassroots on the shop floor, so to speak, initially as a waitress working in the hospitality industry. And I worked from the age of 15 throughout my university degrees and my master's. I was very fortunate to be offered a graduate scheme after I graduated and was running my own hotel and restaurant as a general manager at 23. But I think that was a pivotal part in me developing and shaping my career in CX, because my operational grounding, I understood how business worked, having run my own P&L, but I also had a lot of frontline experience with customers and frontline employees as well. So and I did my first customer experience type roles. They were very much in things like data and analytics, measurement, reporting, insight. Moved from there into more of the marketing proposition perspective. I'm thinking about brand standards and things like brand audits, mystery shoppers, how we can ensure our brands are consistent, while I was working for Whitbread. And I took my first customer experience manager role with the actual title, looking back thinking, oh my God, I've been doing the same thing for years, but I just didn't know what it was called. It actually had a B2B organization, Compass Group, which is a global brand, and that was very much in the service provision market for hospitality and soft services in FM. And I had an amazing time there developing this model for customer experience that started with really listening to the employees, fixing operational challenges, moving into like engaging groups of employees to have these like whole scale launch events where we were going to transform the culture within these businesses, and right the way through to redesigning the experience for the customer based on insights, background to measurement, but a whole load of people stuff around reward recognition, performance management on the flip side of that, and the HR facets of employee experience that underpin customer experience. And this model became so successful that I'd basically get wheeled out to different clients to go and do this approach that really worked to deliver a return on investment consistently of at least 20%. And that won me the accolade of the first woman to win UK Professional of the Year at the CX Awards the year after Ian Golding. And I think it was from that moment, really, I started to get noticed as a bit of a voice in our industry. Also helped me to get headhunted by Sainsbury's to then go and take what I'd been doing over there, but on a much bigger scale. So talking about, 32 million customers every week, 190,000 employees at the time. And I spent 5 years in the retail space, initially leading service proposition and taking, I guess, the business from thinking about services interactions that happened at a contact center or on the shop floor, and evolving that into a real customer experience practice across multiple channels, brands, and services. I set up the customer experience design function there from scratch. And then latterly, before I left, I was head of CX. So amazing time. But in 2017, something just came over me that said, my career progression in this big corporate organization was going to mean I'd have to stop doing CX and go and do something more generalist and prove myself to be able to get up to the next kind of like management level or directorship, and I just didn't really want to. I loved what I did so much. I thought, I've got all this amazing corporate experience, all these amazing brands behind me. Why don't I go and try and do this on my own? And I did. So in 2017, I became the Cx Nomad and set up on my own as initially a freelance consultant and keynote speaker, but that evolved into me having my own customer experience design agency where I worked with a fully remote team of associates, and I was flying around the world having an amazing time until we all know what happened in 2020. The pandemic hit, and I went from having a diary of international speaking events and consulting appointments and workshops to absolutely nothing in my diary pretty much overnight. And I guess that's how I ended up here, really, with Women in CX. That with no work on, I thought, I'm going to start this passion project of something to do with women in our industry. I didn't know what it would be. And it started by me reaching out to women that I'd met through social media, like Instagram. We'd liked each other's stuff, but never spoken. And I needed the connection myself at the time, because whilst the whole world fell apart, so did my personal life. My relationship ended, my housemate moved out, I ended up living alone in lockdown. So I started reaching out to these women and saying, hey, do you fancy going on that newfangled thing, that Zoom thing, and having a chat with me? Because I never used to Zoom ever. And I was really, really happy when a lot of them said, yeah, why not? Let's hang out. But when we hung out, it was under the premise of let's talk about customer experience. But the conversations were always much more around our whole lives and who we were as women. And we talked about things like racism, homophobia, cancer, child loss. And that's how the podcast was born, was basically me saying to some of these women I'd had the most brilliant conversations I've ever had with, do you fancy doing this in front of people on a podcast? And they all said yes. So the podcast, basically, I didn't do anything else for 6 months other than every single week publishing and producing a podcast. And that led me to this awesome opportunity that actually came from a guy, Jonathan Schroyer from Officium Labs, who'd been listening to the podcast and said, I think this is amazing what you're trying to do. If I gave you some money, what would you do with it? And I said, Jonathan, I would start a community. So he gave me $10,000. And from that point in January, I basically took on the best customer experience design project of my life. Built Women in CX with a group of co-founding members. And we've now grown to over 43 countries in just 6 months. So that, in a nutshell, is my career journey.
In French, I would say chapeau. This is really an outstanding journey, and it's really, I think there is already quite a lot of things that we could share. Having a really successful career to nothing because of pandemic, transitioning, having the strength to start again and build up something that really stand out through all the communities that now are popping up. Women in CX is one of the best. I am hearing from quite a lot of people. I had today's different discussion also with some of the founding members, and it's really outstanding what you're doing and the commitment that it's behind it. Before we deep dive in how you are growing the business, how you're creating this business around women in CX, Claire, what are your core values, the values that you try to live every day?
It's interesting because I think my personal values became our community values. So authentic, collaborative, courageous, and inclusive. That was me. And those values have become the same values as our community.
And these are really important values. And now speaking about the community, you started with $10,000 thanks to Officium Labs, and now you are really a great community. What is your vision in the long term about this community?
Interesting question. So I think more than a vision, we have a clear mission, and that is to empower women across the world to collaborate, support, and inspire one another to shape the future of CX together. In terms of how that plays out, I don't quite know, but this is part of the beauty of building a community through co-design, because at each iteration, we're developing our proposition to meet our users where they want to be met. users, can't call members, users, too many years in customer experience design, meet our members where they want to be met. So our value proposition is evolving in line with what they're needing at the time. So what, we started out as was this customer experience design project. As I said, we did this discovery. We sourced people from our podcast listener list. We asked them about their challenges, their goals, what was holding them back, and met this resounding professional loneliness that exists in customer experience. And it was super interesting because when I worked in business, even though I was surrounded by people, I did always feel a bit lonely, because I think the role of a CX professional quite often is fighting this fight that no one can quite understand why it's so important. And especially for women who had their own businesses like I did, especially during the pandemic, the professional loneliness was kind of like multiplied, but also a similar feeling that no one had really found community or the kind of community that they were looking for. So our premise was initially, if women feel like there isn't a seat at the table for them, let's build Women in CX as the biggest table on earth and invite people from all different backgrounds, cultures, countries, disciplines together to form this first founding group of members, not as an afterthought, not how do we make what we're doing diverse and inclusive, but how do we grow from day one with that at the core of who we are and what we do. And I think that's part of the reason we're evolving so rapidly, is because we've got such difference in there and such different perspectives and needs, that it's enabling us to develop a completely different community proposition than anything else that's been done before.
It makes totally sense, and it sounds, because it's what we are discussing. We are always doing experience design, and you are mentioning that you really create the experience around the community members. There are two questions that are popping up, but I need to be polite, one after the other question, and not two questions at the same time. I will park the question around the table, because you mentioned that in other podcasts, and I would like that you repeat this idea around the table. But that's the next question. The question that I would like to ask is, now there are in the CX world, but in general, are popping up quite a lot of communities, and there are a lot of communities with less engagement. What I am feeling, what I am getting, and as information from Women in CX, is that there is a really big commitment, not only from the founding members, but from the community, to collaborate, to create, to co-create together, and to grow this community. Could you please share the secret ingredients of creating such a successful community?
Again, super interesting question, because I didn't know how to build a community. I didn't know how to build a platform-based business. All I knew was how to build customer experience. So I just basically took all of those years of working in corporate and consulting and applied it to this situation in a startup, and I'm essentially engineered a customer insight led discovery that enabled us to design something at a prototype stage that we could bring enough people in to take part in these code design activities and workshop together where this needed to go. So I guess I assume that part of the founding member cohesion was driven out of the fact that we did something amazing together. We built this thing as 30 women, Yes. And I like to think that the kind of core founding member or the leader group that emerged out of that first few months became this like gravitational force, like our universe, that attracted more people, not only from the outside but from the new member cohorts in really easily. So we were super conscious that our experience needed to help people feel welcome and included from day one. So we just went about setting that challenge with our founding members group. How are we going to make people feel welcome and included? And they came up with all these ideas that they went, were happy to implement on their own. And as a result, that, you said about kind of commitment and contribution, it's never something that we've had to work at. It's been very organic and very natural. But the role modeling, I think, that newer members see when they arrive, there's a culture that's been established that this is just the way that we are. We are the most supportive, encouraging, human, authentic community that's very happy to be vulnerable with one another and share not only the celebrations, but also the things we're struggling with. But the response that you get as a member or a new member is exactly the same. People will rush to your aid, and I think the fascinating thing about our community is we weren't trying to build something that kept members on the inside and they could only network with one another through us. We had, a space on their profiles where they could add their social media handles. So beyond the community meetups or the community activities, women became friends and actually built deep and meaningful connections with one another. So I suppose I say as a founder now, like, I just built this thing, I just built the first version of it. What it's become is because of who is in it. This is all down to the women that are filling this community, role modeling our values, basically. And it's just so genuine. So I don't think that is something that's a secret that you can copy. I think the approach had a lot to do with it, but what it is now, I think, is untappable. It's a unique moat, really, for our community, a competitive moat. Not that we're really competing against anybody, because there isn't anyone else trying to do a women in CX community, but I don't think anyone else can kind of replicate that now, especially if they started a long time ago or in a different way, because you can't really retrofit it either. It's come through the natural growth and evolution of the community itself.
Right, it makes totally sense, and it's really, I would say in this case, women-centric or customer-centric in order to create and build this community. And you were speaking about being genuine, and in one of your presentations, because you are everywhere, and I know that perhaps you cannot remember exactly this discussion. The discussion was with Mary Drumond on her podcast, Voices of CX, and you were making an example. It's not about exchanging people at one table, but making the table bigger that also women can sit there. And you were there sharing shocking, and I repeat, really shocking statistics, that there are more male CEO with the name John or Jack. John compared to women. And the other statistic that you were sharing was around how many women finish the studies and how many women then are really sitting in the boardrooms. And for me, it's also because I would like to use this podcast also to share this knowledge, to share the reality, and to make also other people learn about this extremely important topic. Could you please elaborate a bit why it makes sense to enlarge this table, create bigger tables that more people can sit there?
Okay, so I'm going to think how to answer this in the best way. So I think explaining the analogy of the table for anybody who doesn't know, you might hear the phrase like, there's no room for women at the table, or even within female conversations, that if there is a woman at the table, she's going to hold on damn tight to it because she's probably the only one with a seat there. So as I said, in our research, it was very clear, especially in male dominated environments, that actually customer experience is becoming, with the increased relationship with technology, a lot of CX teams are now part of IT teams, or interfacing much more with technology type roles. So when I say like build a bigger table, it's not one where any woman would ever feel like she needs to protect her seat. We just pull up another one for the next person, for the next woman. We bring as many of us together as we can, because we believe in the power of female leadership, being able to guide the future of things like customer experience and business and human-centered business. So that's where that comes from. And then some of the statistics we were talking about was, I talked about, more women graduate college, but they don't end up in the senior roles. That's a problem in of itself. But in the customer experience or customer service industry, the workforce is 70% female, 70%. But when you get to management and supervisory level, that drops to 38. And then when you get to leadership, it drops to 12. So that just does not make sense, does it? Where are the opportunities going? And then when you look at technology, the same is true. So if you look at the percentage of women in, let's say, artificial intelligence, that's around 12%. Developers, something similar to that. Women in IT, 17% of the total population. And then you look at investors, 99% of investors are white men. So women are only 1%. So where these decisions are being made about particularly technology and customer experience, investment decisions, it is a very male dominated conversation. And imagining that table again, there are very few women sitting at it. So so a lot of the work we've been doing recently as a community, for example, CX Day, it was our first WiCX Day as well. We got together and we held these in-person and online events to start to really talk about this and unpick, presented the data and the information that we knew about CX, the state of it, and the record number of complaints citing a lack of humanity in service, this data points around women or the lack of women in these roles, and the career progression not happening, particularly in customer experience and within technology itself, and started to ask why. We're uncovering, yes, there are these external barriers that are put in the way of women because of things like gender bias, maybe, or women have to have a track record to get promoted, whereas men get promoted on potential. These are the facts. But I think where we're hitting against, especially in the conversations in the community, is how much women have internalized these barriers as well. So in fact, we're actually holding ourselves back. So we won't apply for the jobs unless we've got 99% of the criteria. That's not something that men struggle with. We hear this word imposter syndrome appearing everywhere, not feeling brave enough to step up and ask for more. We see the gender pay gaps, like in CX, like the pay gap at 44, I think it was like 13%. Women are getting paid 13% less, but if we choose to have children, we have to take career breaks, like how but men don't earn less money just because they've had children, and that just doesn't seem really that fair. So it's super interesting, but we're already starting to see women in our community standing up for themselves, going to the board and saying, actually, I think we can tie CX to business outcomes here. I think we can build a pillar that's about customer experience and brand strategy. Actually, you want to bring these teams together. I want to be the person to lead that team, and this is the reason why. And we're seeing people getting promoted, getting pay rises, getting their strategies listened to, and learning from one another how to get around it. And the only other thing I guess I'd say is there aren't that many women who've walked the path. So if you think about female CEOs as the example, or female board level directors, there aren't that many women mentors to be able to find out how to do that. So, being able to have women at different stages of their career who fought some of these battles and are happy to share their battle scars and how they got them, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Again, I learned probably way more by messing things up, failing repeatedly than I ever did when I got things right. But if I can share more of those stories with women that are tackling similar challenges in customer experience or their careers more broadly, they can pick something up and be like, right, okay, I've now got a tool to go navigate that conversation or that kind of thing. So that's why I think it's important. And having female only spaces, I always get pulled up on, where are the men? It can't be diverse and inclusive if there aren't any men in women in CX. But I think women do need safe spaces to meet and collaborate and share together. So much as we have men who are faculty academy leaders, so they come in and they give us webinars and they help us out, and we have conversations about men and women. I don't ever see women in CX becoming a space that has men in the social network. But we would love to think how women in CX can help to influence external groups and hold sessions for how can men be more aware of female leadership challenges and how to nurture and support more women through their careers. And I think we're growing such a powerful platform of people that actually we're not that far away from being able to influence these things more broadly.
Yes, and I think the automatic question that I have now, it's on one side, how can we help? Because you are mentioning it's women in CX, and also male can help some support. Is there a specific way, or should people contact you if they would like to help support growing this community?
Yeah, I suppose that hopefully just hearing this podcast has perhaps made some people a bit more aware of the inequalities that exist when it comes to gender. And if you dig a little deeper, when you start to mix in other intersectional inequalities with that of race and gender, so race and disability, sexual orientation, those margins get even lower for people and women in those kinds of roles. So hopefully this is just a starting point to maybe question, when you look around the room, how many women are at the decision making table where you are, and what needs to change in order to help to facilitate that. So again, just taking that customer experience approach that we're all so familiar with, can you talk to some women in your organization? Maybe can you maybe talk to your women at home, your sisters, your mothers, your aunties? Just ask them about life experience and try to get a little more connected to some of the struggles that you may not be aware of. And when it comes to taking action, as I said, there aren't enough female mentors to go around. A lot of the time, I think there's nervousness or reticence about men mentoring women. I think it's a brilliant thing. So perhaps, even considering what women are in my organization, they've been identified as potential. And actually, if I was to choose to give some of my time to helping them, sponsoring and supporting them, that would be what creates change within the organizations. That's what guys can do. But
I would say.
Yeah. No, and it's great. And I can tell, you've always been such a vocal supporter of what we're doing over here. And we really value and appreciate that 100%. We're really excited to be starting to partner with some organizations who have huge platforms where they want women in CX to become part of their events, to host roundtable discussions with their groups of customers and their women and their men. So I guess if anybody's interested in their own diversity and inclusion agenda and how women in CX might be able to help, either through providing membership for your employees or some kind of partnership, as I said, with these things like events, then I'd love to. I hear from you. Please do get in touch anytime.
In touch directly with you, or is there some contact details that you can share on this podcast, and we will put them on the show notes?
Yeah, well, you can contact me on LinkedIn anytime. I'll definitely pass on my details for direct contact. But also anyone who just wants to join, any women out there who think, oh, this sounds like it could be great, just head to www.womeninCX.community. And on our landing page, you'll see a link to sign up to our introductory events. And you can come along and find out a bit more, meet some founding members, get immersed in the Women in CX vibe and that magic that I mentioned. You're more than welcome to come along anytime.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And now in the last part of this discussion, we would know a bit more about you. The first question I would like to ask is there a book that you would like to suggest to the audience related to what we discussed or related to CX?
Oh, gosh. Well, yeah. So of all the CX books that have ever been written, the only two that I really ever recommend to anybody is Matt Watkinson. Let's hold it up to the camera here. The 10 Principles Behind Great Customer Experiences. And that's a really great starting point. And his second book, actually, The Grid. It's not just about customer experience, but business more broadly. But I think this one is your follow-up one. But this is much more about refining and developing product ideas, identifying the root cause of business challenges. If you understand the principles, then being able to engage the business side of thinking behind that, these two are very complementary. And then the other one, that's just because it's on my desk at the moment, is Gap Selling by Keenan. And for anyone who struggles to sell customer experience to their C-suite, to their executives, to ever pitch to anyone why some kind of change needs to happen, you need to read this book, because there is a certain amount of science behind identifying the gap to fill that customer experience can certainly fill. But if we go in with an approach of trying to tell people what CX can do versus identifying the gap that it can fill, we're always going to end up coming up short. So yeah, so they're my three. the 10 principles behind great customer experiences and the Atkinson and Gap Selling by Keenan.
Thank you.
Having 3.
It's perfect. It's more value for the audience, and it was really a great discussion, a valuable discussion. And now we have additional value from these 3 books, and therefore we are coming also to the last question I would like to ask you, and this is Clare golden nugget. It's something that we discussed or something new that you would like to leave to the audience.
Oh gosh, so we talked about so much today. I don't even know. I guess just, remember what you're doing all of this for. The purpose behind any organization should always be about providing the maximum amount of value they can to the people within it, whether that's the customer or the employee. And yeah, realistically, it's hard to do, but if you take a step back and you stay focused on that, delivering value to humans, the results honestly will take care of themselves. And some of the stats that we've had coming out of the community, like 88 NPS, 90% contribution rate, 60% daily average users, 9 out of 10 for feeling welcome and included on all the key KPIs that we know we're going to make this community sustainable. We never focused on any of that, any of the numbers, or even the first question you asked me is, what's the vision? Where are you going? We've invested entirely in this idea of creating value and listening and heading in the direction that we need to go in based on the humans within our organization. So I would say, think about people, the results will take care of themselves.
Thank you very much. This was really a great golden nugget. It was Clare golden nuggets. Therefore, no comment from my side. The only thing that I can say is thank you very much for your time. It was outstanding to have you on the CX Goalkeeper podcast. Thank you, Clare.
No, thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you to the audience for listening.
Thank you very much. And I hope also that the audience enjoyed as much this discussion as I did, because it was really outstanding. I will share in the show notes all the relevant links, and I can conclude saying, please, let's support women in CX. It's really extremely important, and it makes businesses more successful if we have also women at the board tables. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share the word of mouth, subscribe it, share it. Until the next episode, please don't forget, we are not in a B2B or B2C business, we are in a human-to-human environment. Thank you.